We will not let Iran drag this process for no reason, says the Secretary of State. What does it mean? I mean, the negotiations barely started on Monday. Were they over by Friday?
No, I can't suppress a little smile because Antony Blinken, who is not a novice in diplomacy, seems to be new to negotiating with Iranians. Iranians use time as a strategy in every negotiation they have had with the Western powers over the last 2 decades over the nuclear issue. And the strategy generally is, why make life easy for your counterparts if you can make it difficult? And especially in these circumstances, the current circumstances, where you have a new regime in Iran, nobody knew what exactly their stance would be, but everybody understood that there might be a possibility that they will come with very uncompromising and unacceptable positions as a starting point for negotiations, and that is precisely what has happened. So no, the negotiations will not stop on Friday. They will resume this week, in the coming week. I don't know for how long, but I don't see a real possibility that the negotiations will stop at such a short notice. I think the message that Antony Blinken is trying to convey is to the Iranians to say there is a limit to our patience for this well-known strategy of yours. And
we also mentioned that the chief of Mossad is traveling to Washington this week. Benny Gantz, defense minister, will do it. And maybe they're not very sad that the negotiations are failing because Israel was saying loud and clear, there's no point in negotiations because it will take you nowhere.
Yes. So the good news here is that there is a lot of transparency and a lot of coordination between Jerusalem and Washington, and that is a very, very important element for Israel. It's the only way that Israel can have some kind of influence on how the negotiations go, because Israel is not privy to these negotiations. So that's the good part. Now, the Israeli position is to say, listen, there's no point, don't negotiate. But there is no real other option that Israel is offering. There is the option of sanctions, but everybody knows that their effect is limited because there are countries that won't participate, and the Iranians always have the Chinese option of getting practically anything they need to circumvent these sanctions. So I'm not saying that the sanctions didn't hurt the Iranian economy, but they didn't render it unlivable in Iran. So that's the second point. My guess is, between the lines, is that the Israeli position openly, publicly, is to say to the Americans, listen, there's no point, just stop the negotiations. There's no point in trying to strive towards an agreement. Between the lines, I think that the main concern in Israel currently is the less for less option, the limited interim agreement, which in Jerusalem is considered to be really the worst of all options, because it will not put total limits on Iran's ability to move forward on the nuclear program, and it will not maintain the majority of sanctions, of pressure on Iran. So I think that is now the main concern that Mr. Barnea and Minister Gantz will try to convey in Washington.
You mentioned the fact that the Israeli position is one that has to be heard. Israel is not directly involved in the negotiations, right. but an interesting comment there coming from French President Emmanuel Macron about the fact that Israel's interests have to be heard. Let's listen.
Saudi Arabia has a legitimate concern for the possibility of Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. I say it is a legitimate concern, and we share it because I think it is just not a concern for the Iran's neighbors, but for the whole region and more broadly the international community. I have said it. I have been saying it since 2017. I am among those who believe that we cannot deal with the nuclear issue without dealing with the issue of regional stability, and we can't move forward without involving in the discussion our friends in the region.
Israel has to be involved, says President Macron. He says it in Saudi Arabia because let's remember, Iran is not only an Israeli concern, an important message coming from the French president.
Yeah, so I think the context is important. He is touring the Gulf states. He was in the United Arab Emirates, he was in Qatar, and now he's in Saudi Arabia. And clearly the Iranian nuclear threat is very present in every discussion that you have with these countries. So I think the context for this statement is important, but the fact that he included Israel as part of the regional concerns, and he could do this, in one sentence, joining Israel and Gulf states together, is also a sign of new collaborations and new common interests in this region between Israel and some of the Arab countries here.
Interesting comments there coming. Ambassador Daniel Shek, thank you very much for being with us.